The bikers noticed the black waitress freeze when dark motorcycles pulled into the lot. They saw the limp she tried to hide, the bruises beneath her sleeve. What they did next didn't involve fists or threats, but it gave her something she thought she'd lost forever. The bell above the diner door chimed like a warning. 12 leather-clad bikers walked in, their boots heavy on the checkerboard floor. The afternoon sun slanted through the blinds, cutting stripes across their faces. At the counter, an elderly man looked up from his pie, fork frozen midway to his mouth. A young couple in the corner booth pulled their toddler closer. Marcus removed his sunglasses first. His crew followed. "The Ironhawks didn't come here to scare anybody," he said, his voice carrying that particular kind of calm that made people relax. "Gentlemen, we'll take the back booths." Coffee all around. The diner was called Betty's, one of those forgotten roadside places time had polished instead of ruined. Red vinyl seats patched with duct tape, a jukebox that only played songs from 1995, the smell of burnt coffee and maple syrup thick enough to taste. Behind the counter, a black woman in her late 20s looked up. Her name tag read Aisha in faded letters. "Coming right up," she said, her smile genuine but tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. Marcus watched her move toward the coffee station. That's when he saw it. The slight hitch in her left leg. Not a limp exactly. More like she was protecting something, favoring one side. She moved like someone who'd learned to hide pain, so well it had become part of her rhythm. His crew settled into the booths, still buzzing from the charity ride. They'd just delivered $3,000 worth of school supplies to the reservation up north. Good day, clean consciences. The kind of tired that feels earned. "Yo, Marcus, remember when that kid asked if your bike was a rocket?" Devin laughed, pulling off his bandana. "His face when you revved the engine? Priceless." Marcus agreed, but his attention had drifted. Aisha was carrying a tray of mugs balanced perfectly. But that leg, she was compensating hard. When she reached their table, she set the cups down with practiced efficiency. But Marcus noticed the slight tremor in her right hand, overcompensating for the left side. "Sugar's on the table, cream's coming," she said. "You boys need menus, or just coffee today?" "Just coffee is fine," Marcus said carefully. "Long shift." Something flickered across her face. "Every shift's long here," she said lightly. "But it's honest work." She moved to the next booth. The limp was more pronounced from behind. Marcus's jaw tightened. Devin noticed his expression. "Boss, nothing." Marcus said nothing. But it wasn't nothing. The thing about Marcus was this. He'd grown up in a house where his mother hid bruises with makeup and long sleeves. He'd learned early that silence could be its own kind of violence. He'd sworn at 15, standing over his father's unconscious body after he'd finally fought back, that he'd never ignore the signs again. Aisha brought their cream. When she leaned over to set it down, her sleeve rode up just slightly, just enough. A bracelet of purple and yellow decorated her wrist, the kind that didn't come from jewelry. Marcus's blood went cold. She noticed him noticing. Their eyes met for half a second, hers widening with something like panic before she tugged her sleeve down and moved away quickly. Too quickly. She caught her hip on the corner of a table, and a coffee mug crashed to the floor. The diner went silent except for the shattering. "Damn it," Aisha whispered, dropping to her knees. Her hands shook as she picked up the pieces. "I'm so sorry. I'll clean this up." Hey, no worries," the old man at the counter said. "Happens to everybody." But Marcus saw what nobody else did. Tears gathering in her eyes that had nothing to do with a broken mug. And when she stood, she put weight on that left leg wrong and winced. A real, sharp wince she tried to hide by coughing. The cook came out, a heavy-set man with tired eyes. "Aisha, you okay?" "Fine, Tommy. Just clumsy today." Her voice was bright. Too bright. Marcus looked at his crew. They'd all gone quiet. Men who'd seen things. Men who recognized things. Devin leaned in. "Boss, that's—" "I know," Marcus said quietly. They finished their coffee in near silence. The usual banter felt wrong now. Marcus left 2 20s for a $6 tab, then pulled out one of his business cards, the ones with just his first name and a phone number. No logo, nothing threatening. He waited until Aisha came back to clear their table. "Ma'am," he said, standing. The rest of his crew stood too, out of habit and respect. "You take care of yourself." She looked at him, really looked, and for a moment something passed between them. An understanding, a question, maybe a plea. "You too," she said softly. Marcus placed the card under the 20s, face down. Then he and his crew walked out, the bell chiming again as they left. Outside, the late afternoon sun painted everything gold. The bikes sat in a perfect row, chrome gleaming. Marcus pulled on his sunglasses but didn't mount his bike yet. "We staying?" Devin asked. "Not yet," Marcus said. "But we're coming back." He looked back through the window. Aisha was standing at their table, staring down at the card and the money. She picked up the card slowly, read it, then pressed it against her chest like a secret. That's when Marcus saw them. 3 motorcycles pulling into the far end of the parking lot. Darker bikes, meaner edges, painted across their gas tanks in violent red. A serpent with its mouth open, ready to strike. Aisha saw them too. Through the window, Marcus watched her face drain of color. She stumbled backward, the card falling from her hand. She didn't pick it up. She just moved quickly toward the kitchen, her limp forgotten in her urgency to disappear. The men on the dark bikes hadn't dismounted yet. They just sat there, engines rumbling, watching the diner. Watching. Marcus's hand curled into a fist. "Boss," Devin said, a warning in his voice. "We don't know what this is." "We know enough," Marcus said. But he didn't move toward them. Not yet. Instead, he started his bike and his crew followed suit. 12 engines roared to life in unison, a sound like thunder, like a promise. As they pulled away, Marcus looked in his mirror for one last time. The men on the dark bikes were still there, still watching, and through the diner window, he could just make out Aisha's silhouette in the kitchen doorway. She was shaking. The rain started at 9 p.m. on October 15th, 2024, just as Marcus turned his bike back toward Betty's diner. He tried to stay away, told himself it wasn't his business, drove 20 miles toward home with his crew, listening to Devin talk about his daughter's soccer game, pretending everything was normal. But that image, Aisha's face draining of color, her hands shaking, wouldn't leave him alone. "You know we're going back," Devin had said finally. Marcus had nodded. "Yeah." Now 4 of them rode through the rain. Marcus, Devin, Rico, and Big Mike. The rest of the crew had families waiting. But these 4, they understood the kind of debt you owed to strangers who needed help. The diner's neon sign flickered against the wet darkness. Betty's Diner. Half the letters dead. The parking lot was nearly empty except for 3 motorcycles lined up near the entrance like sentries. Dark bikes, red serpent logos. They were still here. "Park across the street," Marcus said quietly into his headset. "Lights off." They pulled into the closed gas station opposite the diner, far enough to watch, but close enough to move fast if needed. Through the rain-streaked windows, they could see inside the diner clearly. Aisha was wiping down the counter, moving slower now, the limp more pronounced. She looked exhausted, but every few seconds she glanced toward the corner booth where 3 men sat, leather jackets dark with rain, their patches visible even from across the street. "Grave serpents." "That's Vince," Rico said, pointing to the man in the middle. "I'd recognize that bastard anywhere." Marcus looked at him sharply. "You know him?" "Know of him. Runs a chop shop operation out of the industrial zone. Mean son of a bitch. Heard he put 2 guys in the hospital last year over a $50 debt." Rico spat into the rain. "The kind who likes hurting people." As if on cue, Vince stood up. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar running from his eyebrow to his cheek. He walked toward the counter where Aisha stood frozen. Marcus's hand moved to his door handle. "Easy," Devin warned. Through the window, they watched Vince lean against the counter, too close to Aisha. She stepped back. He followed. His mouth was moving. They couldn't hear the words, but the body language was clear, aggressive, possessive. Aisha shook her head, her hands gripping the counter edge. Vince reached out and grabbed her wrist, the bruised one. Even from across the street, they saw her face contort in pain. Marcus's door opened before he realized he'd moved. "Boss," Devin started. But then something unexpected happened. The cook, Tommy, came through the kitchen door carrying a baseball bat. Not threatening, just visible. He stood next to Aisha, solid and immovable, said something short, pointed toward the door. Vince's laugh was visible even without sound. He released Aisha's wrist, held up both hands in mock surrender. But as he backed toward his booth, he pointed at Aisha, then tapped his watch. "A clear message. I'll be back. I've got time." Marcus forced himself back into his seat, forced his breathing to steady. "She knows him," Big Mike said quietly. That wasn't random intimidation. That was personal. The serpents threw money on the table, not enough, probably, and walked out. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. They mounted their bikes without hurry, supremely confident. Before starting his engine, Vince looked back at the diner one more time. Then he looked directly across the street, at them. Marcus's blood froze. They'd been made. Vince smiled slowly, revved his engine twice. A challenge, then pulled away, his crew following. Their taillights disappeared into the darkness like red eyes closing. He saw us, Devin said. Yeah. Marcus watched the road where they had vanished. He wanted us to see him. Inside the diner, Aisha had collapsed onto a stool, her face in her hands. Tommy stood beside her, one hand on her shoulder. After a moment, she looked up, wiped her eyes, and stood, forced herself to keep working, to keep moving. We need to leave, Devin said. If Vince knows we're watching, he might come back harder. Yeah. Marcus started his engine. But we're not leaving her alone. What's the play? Marcus thought about his mother. About the night his father had finally gone too far. About how nobody had helped until it was almost too late. About how silence and good intentions meant nothing without action. But he also thought about strategy, about the fact that Vince was expecting a fight. Men like him always expected fists and fury. They understood that language. So Marcus would speak a different one. We find out everything, he said. Who Vince is, what he wants with Aisha, why she's scared. And then we don't just chase him off. We make sure he can't come back. How? Marcus pulled on his helmet, rain streaming down his visor. By being smarter than him. They rode away slowly, deliberately. But when they reached the main road, Marcus stopped, pulled out his phone, called a number he hadn't used in 6 months. Detective Morrison, it's Marcus. Yeah, I know it's late. Listen, I need information on someone. Name's Vince. Runs with a crew called the Grave Serpents. Behind them, the diner's lights flickered through the rain. And inside, Aisha locked the door, turned off the open sign, and finally, let herself cry.